Welcome back. In our last session, we talked about why academic writing is not just for publications, but a core professional skill in both medical affairs and healthcare practice. Today, we're going to take a step further and explore the foundations of good academic writing. Think of these foundations as the building blocks. Without them, even the most brilliant ideas can lose their impact when put into words. There are many techniques we can talk about, but four principles stand out above the rest: clarity, precision, conciseness, and objectivity. These aren't abstract concepts. They are practical tools that you can apply immediately in your daily work. Whether you're writing a regulatory response, summarizing insights from a KOL, drafting a clinical note, or preparing an abstract for a conference, these four principles will determine whether your writing is easy to understand, accurate, efficient, and credible. So, in this tutorial, we'll break each one down, look at examples, and see how applying them can transform the way you communicate. Strong academic writing doesn't just happen by chance. It's built on a foundation of principles that guide every sentence we put on paper. And today, we're going to look at four of the most important ones: clarity, precision, conciseness, and objectivity. Now, why these four? Because in medical affairs and healthcare, our writing isn't just about style. It's about safety, credibility, and impact. A vague sentence in a regulatory document can delay approval. An imprecise claim in a value dossier can weaken your argument. A wordy abstract may get ignored at a conference, and a biased interpretation of data can damage trust. So in the next few slides, we'll walk through each principle, see what it really means in practice, and explore examples that make it come alive. Let's start with clarity. Clarity means making your message easy to understand for your intended audience. It's about cutting through the fog and leaving no room for misinterpretation. Think about writing an internal insight summary after a KOL engagement. If you write, "The physician expressed some concerns about adherence," that's vague. But if you clarify, "The physician highlighted that 40% of her patients struggle with adherence due to dosing complexity," now the message is clear, specific, and actionable. Clarity also means avoiding unnecessary jargon. We may love our acronyms in pharma, but if your audience is a payer or a regulator outside your therapeutic area, jargon becomes a barrier. Finally, clarity is about structure, using logical flow, headings, and short sentences so your reader doesn't get lost. Now let's talk about precision. Precision is the difference between saying, "Drug X improved outcomes," and saying, "Drug X reduced hospitalizations by 28% in patients with moderate to severe asthma compared to standard therapy." In medical affairs, precision is non-negotiable. Regulators demand it. KOLs expect it. Internal teams rely on it. If you write something vague like, "The study showed good results," what does that mean? Good compared to what? How was it measured? Precision requires evidence. Every claim should be backed by data, references, or clearly defined parameters. This principle reminds us, never leave your reader guessing. Give them exactly what they need to understand, trust, and act on your message. So, next is conciseness. And this one is especially important in our world because our audiences are busy. Whether it's a regulator reviewing 500 pages or a physician reading an abstract between patient visits, no one has time for fluff. Conciseness means delivering maximum meaning with minimum words. Instead of writing, "Due to the fact that patients were unable to adhere consistently, outcomes were negatively impacted," you could simply say, "Poor adherence worsened outcomes." Same message, fewer words, much stronger impact. Conciseness doesn't mean cutting out detail that matters. It means stripping away anything that doesn't serve the message. Every extra word is a distraction. And when we respect the reader's time, our writing has a greater chance of being read, understood, and remembered. Finally, let's talk about objectivity. This is the cornerstone of academic writing. Objectivity means focusing on facts, not personal opinions. It's about letting the data speak louder than your preferences or assumptions. For example, instead of writing, "This therapy is clearly the best option for patients," you might write, "Clinical trial data show a 15% improvement in survival compared with current standard of care." One is biased and subjective, the other is factual and evidence-based. Objectivity also means using neutral language. Avoid exaggerations like breakthrough or game changer, unless those words are supported by official designations or consensus. Our role, especially in medical affairs, is to present information in a way that decision makers can trust. Objectivity is what protects our credibility. So we've covered our 4 core principles: clarity, precision, conciseness, and objectivity. Think of them not as 4 separate rules, but as pieces of a puzzle. Clarity makes your message understandable. Precision ensures it's accurate. Conciseness makes it efficient. And objectivity guarantees it's trustworthy. When you apply them together, your writing becomes powerful. Regulators trust it. Healthcare professionals respect it. Internal teams rely on it. And ultimately, your communication has impact. The kind of impact that shapes strategy, influences policy, and improves patient care. Now let's talk more about jargon. Every field has its own language. Acronyms, technical terms, shorthand that makes sense to insiders. But when we rely too much on jargon, our writing becomes a barrier instead of a bridge. Think about this. If you write a medical insights summary filled with abbreviations like PD-1 inhibitor or QOL outcomes without explanation, your cross-functional colleagues in marketing or even some payers may not fully grasp the meaning. Instead of clarifying science, jargon can confuse and exclude. Even regulators sometimes push back if writing is overloaded with unexplained acronyms. Remember, academic writing is about communication, not showing how specialized we are. The goal is to make the science accessible, not to hide it behind complex terminology. Of course, we can't eliminate technical language completely. Accuracy depends on it. The trick is to balance accuracy with accessibility. For example, when you introduce an acronym like QOL, always write it in full the first time. Quality of life, QOL. After that, you can use the abbreviation. If you're writing for regulators, precision is critical. They expect the exact scientific terminology. But if you're writing an executive summary for senior leadership, you might simplify complex pathways into plain language. It's not about dumbing down. It's about tailoring your writing so your audience understands without losing accuracy. Here's a quick example. Imagine your study results section says, "The study demonstrated HR 0.72, 95% confidence interval 0.60 to 0.85 for PFS." Now, that's technically correct. But outside of oncology statisticians, how many readers will immediately grasp what that means? Instead, you could write, "The therapy reduced the risk of disease progression by 28% with strong statistical confidence." See the difference? Same accuracy. The numbers are still there, but the meaning is brought forward in plain language. That's the balance we need to aim for. Keep the science intact, but make the message easy to digest. Now we come to the last part of this tutorial, and we will be talking about common pitfalls in healthcare writing. Let's begin with one of the most common pitfalls in healthcare and medical affairs writing: vague language. Now, why is vagueness such a problem? Because in our world, details matter. A single vague statement can completely change how information is interpreted. Let me give you a classic example. Imagine you're reading a trial summary that says, the drug was effective. Effective how? Effective compared to placebo? Effective in lowering symptoms? Effective in improving survival? Without specifics, that sentence tells you almost nothing. This happens all the time in internal reports, regulatory submissions, even in abstracts. And here's the risk. When your writing is vague, every reader fills in the blanks differently. A regulator might interpret it one way, a payer another way, and your internal colleagues in yet another way. Instead of aligning understanding, vague language creates confusion. Now, compare that vague statement to something precise. The drug reduced cardiovascular hospitalizations by 15% compared to standard of care in patients with type 2 diabetes. Suddenly, the meaning is crystal clear. There's no guesswork, no ambiguity. Everyone who reads that sentence walks away with the same understanding. So here's the principle. Whenever you write a claim or a result, ask yourself, could someone interpret this in more than one way? If the answer is yes, it's too vague. Anchor your message in data, in context, in specifics. That's what transforms vague language into credible, actionable writing. Another common pitfall we see in healthcare and medical affairs writing is the overuse of passive voice. Now, to be clear, passive voice is not automatically wrong. In fact, you'll often find it in scientific writing. But when it becomes your default style, it weakens your message and creates unnecessary ambiguity. Here's why. Passive voice hides responsibility. Let's take an example. Imagine you're reading a trial report that says, it was decided that the study would be terminated early. Well, who decided that? Was it the Data Safety Monitoring Board? Was it the regulator? Was it the sponsor company? The passive construction leaves the reader guessing. And in a field where accountability matters, that's a problem. Now, compare it with an active voice version. The Data Safety Monitoring Board decided to terminate the study early due to safety concerns. Suddenly, the sentence is stronger, clearer, and there's no confusion about who acted. Think about regulators reviewing documents. They want to know exactly who made a decision. Or think about internal colleagues reading an insights report. They need to understand which stakeholder said what. Passive voice blurs that clarity. Now there are times when passive voice makes sense. For example, the samples were stored at minus 80 degrees Celsius. Here, who did the storing isn't important. But when the actor is critical, when responsibility matters, active voice is always stronger. Overusing passive voice makes your writing heavy, distant, and hard to trust. Active voice, on the other hand, brings clarity, accountability, and energy to your message. Let's move to another pitfall that weakens healthcare writing: redundancy and wordiness. This happens when we use too many words to express an idea that could be communicated simply. Why is this a problem? Because our audiences, regulators, clinicians, payers, internal teams are all pressed for time. Every extra word they have to wade through slows them down and increases the chance that they miss your key message. Let me show you an example. A sentence like, due to the fact that patients were unable to adhere consistently, outcomes were negatively impacted sounds academic, but it's bloated. You could just say, poor adherence worsened outcomes. The meaning is the same, but it's sharper, cleaner, and more powerful. Redundancy also creeps in when we repeat the same idea in slightly different words. For instance, the study was completed and finished in 2023. Completed and finished mean the same thing. One of them doesn't belong. Or in protocols, you'll often see overly long phrases like "at this point in time" instead of "just now." Conciseness isn't about cutting important details, it's about removing the clutter so the real message shines through. In fact, concise writing shows respect for your reader's time. It tells them, "I value your attention and I won't waste it on unnecessary words." That's how you make your writing impactful, not by writing more, but by writing smart. Another pitfall that often undermines healthcare and medical affairs writing is a lack of logical flow. You can have the best data, the strongest evidence, but if the ideas are not presented in the right order, your audience will struggle to follow and may even stop reading. Think of logical flow as guiding your reader through a journey. If you jump from results, back to background, then over to conclusions, then suddenly back to methods, you lose them. It's like giving someone directions to a hospital but in random order. First the final turn, then the starting street, then something in the middle. They'll never get there. In writing, structure is your best friend. Whether you're drafting a regulatory report, a clinical abstract, or an internal strategy paper, your ideas need to follow a logical progression. The classic scientific structure: introduction, methods, results, discussion, works because it mirrors how readers naturally absorb information. Transitions are also key. Small phrases like "as a result," "in contrast," or "building on this finding" act as signposts, telling your reader where they are on the journey. Headings and subheadings do the same. They break long documents into manageable sections and make navigation easier. So here's the lesson. Don't just write down information as it comes to you. Step back. Ask yourself, if I were the reader, what order would make this easiest to understand? Logical flow isn't about adding more content. It's about arranging what you already have so it makes sense. Let's look at one of the most damaging pitfalls in academic and healthcare writing: ignoring the audience. It's very easy to forget that different readers have different needs. When we don't adjust our writing to the audience, even the strongest evidence can miss its impact. Take regulators, for example. They expect exact technical terminology, compliance with guidelines, and full detail. A vague or overly simplified statement in a regulatory dossier will likely lead to questions, delays, or even rejection. Now compare that to senior leadership. Executives are busy. They don't want a 50-page dossier. They want a 2-page summary with the key data and strategic implications. If you give them the same text you prepared for regulators, you'll lose their attention. And then there are KOLs. When you're documenting insights from an engagement, your internal colleagues need to see not only what was said, but also the context, the evidence, and how it aligns with broader strategy. That requires careful balance. Enough detail to capture meaning, but written in a way that the non-specialist can follow. So here's the question you should always ask before you start writing. Who is going to read this, and what do they need from me? If you don't answer that question, you risk writing for yourself, not for your reader. And when that happens, your message doesn't land, no matter how strong the science is. As we wrap up this tutorial, let's take a step back and connect everything we've covered. We started with the core principles of good academic writing: clarity, precision, conciseness, and objectivity. These are not just nice-to-have qualities. They're the foundation of everything we write in medical affairs and healthcare. Clarity ensures your message is understood. Precision guarantees accuracy. Conciseness respects your reader's time. And objectivity safeguards your credibility. Then, we talked about the importance of avoiding jargon, while still maintaining accuracy. Because remember, our goal isn't to impress with complicated terms, it's to communicate science in a way that our audience can act on. Sometimes that means spelling out acronyms, sometimes simplifying a statistical result into plain language. Finally, we explored some of the most common pitfalls that weaken healthcare writing: vague language, overuse of passive voice, redundancy, poor logical flow, and ignoring the audience. Each one may seem small, but together they can completely undermine your message. The good news is that every pitfall has a simple fix: awareness, practice, and applying the principles we've discussed. The big takeaway is this: strong writing builds trust. Regulators trust you, KOLs respect you, payers believe you, and colleagues rely on you. Whether it's a protocol, an insights report, or a case study, your words have weight. And when your writing is clear, precise, concise, and objective, you don't just share information, you shape decisions, strategies, and ultimately patient care. Thank you very much, and see you in the next tutorial.